Hi there. I'm having a connection issue this evening. So I am here for session 0 of Optimized You. And I have a backup recording in place right now in case anything goes funny in terms of my connection here. So I have my other computer recording this as well. I hope everyone is doing awesome, and I'm guessing that many people will watch this in replay. This is in support of Optimized You, the book that just came out over the summer, and we're getting going with having a 9-part series to help implement the tips that are in the book. But the tips are all about execution. And if you don't really have something that you want to change in your life or make significant progress on, execution will kind of fall to the wayside. Basically, the status quo will be okay when you realize that it might be a little bit hard to make some adjustments in your life. And, I say hard, life can be hard either way. It can be hard because we don't put any effort in the beginning to do some planning and some forethought. It can also be hard at the back end if we're, kind of losing energy as we go through life and we realize, oh, if I had only, thought about this a little bit more, I would have had a totally different experience. So hi to those who are on. Hi, Mary Jo, Kristen, Trisha, I see you, and I'm getting warm. And I have to say, my cat, Charlie here, is making his presence known. I think he wants some attention. So we'll see if he jumps onto things. So again, thanks for being here. And I wanted to have a session 0 so that we could establish what we're trying to do as individuals, depending on what you need in your life. So generally people, if they're feeling some kind of pain or angst or somewhere, it happens to fall in one of 4 categories. It can either be health related, it could be professionally related, it could be romantic, your love life related, and it might be spiritual or wisdom related, and it can go into any factor. Like social could be a broader or a more narrow of those. And so however it is for you, it is for you. So there's likely some one of those areas, or maybe all 4, that you'd like to see some change in. But how do we actually change things? Well, the execution book obviously helps, but we also need to know really what we want to change. And so I thought I would just go through and do what I do with some sessions when I'm, hosting or presenting in front of a group at a conference or something like that, just so we can begin to think of what we might want to change if it's not already clear to you. For some of you, it's very clear. Some people have very big goals and they have to make it work. And it's like, okay, I need more tips to make this work. Other people, it's kind of like, life is kind of uncomfortable, but I don't know if I really want to change that much. I mean, years ago, I knew that my diet was a mess. And, in my early 20s, I knew that how I was eating and my reliance on sugar was really affecting a lot in my life, but I was not willing to change. I knew that the change that was implied in all that, I was not ready for. I knew that I did not want to make that kind of change. So I didn't, it took me 20, 25 years to make that kind of change when it really became painful because it was affecting other parts of my life. So again, how you decide to change and when is up to you. So again, I wanted to say again, I have a Zoom backup in case any of my connection falls flat. Also, if anyone has any questions, please ask them and send emojis or ask questions after the fact. I want to archive the questions that are asked over time, and maybe there'll be some common questions so I can address them in between as we get going. So one of the things I do with these groups, and some of you may have seen this before, is I'll get an audience going by asking the question, what would you do if you had 2 extra hours gifted to you in a day? So if you're at work, say, meetings were cleared or your schedule was just cleared, what would you do? And you had to stay at work. You couldn't just take off and go home. Or if it was in your personal life, what would you do if you were given 2 hours? So generally I start asking the audience what this means to them, and I have them call back. So I'm not going to do that today, but I'm going to guess what you all are thinking about what you would do if you had 2 more hours. And usually, and I'm writing them down too. This is what I do with the group. I do it on flip chart paper, and this is column A. And I'll start asking, and usually sleep is on this list. Of course, sleep is wrought with all sorts of things. Exercise is always on the list. And then to some degree, either reading or some kind of like personal development. Some people will say gardening or some kind of hobby. For Tom, my husband, it would be fishing or golf, or maybe, working on the still. So these types of hobby type of things. And maybe you guys have something completely different. Sometimes it's just getting organized, getting things kind of in shape, whatever those things are. So my writing is getting a little bit messy, but people will develop a list of the things that they would do if they only had more time. Like this big limiting factor is time. We all have 168 hours in the week, right? So people write this down. And then the next question I ask in column B is what's getting in the way? And you know, we have the obvious things, right? Most of us have to go to work. We have like chores. We have things like laundry and other things that if we don't do, they become mountains. We have family responsibilities, and those can go from elder care, child care, that really, you know, care of others can fall into that quite a bit. And then other things we've signed up for. Maybe we've said too many, yes to too many things. Again, if you guys have anything you want to add to this list, all the things that get in the way of having more time for the things that matter. And some of these things you choose and some of them you don't choose. But then we talk about column C, and I call this the ABC matrix. And I don't know if anyone noticed, but the book's publishing group is ABC Matrix Publishing because it was my own publishing. That's how I named it. So column C here is what's the negative consequence of the fact that we don't get enough of column C and that column B is kind of poorly managed, or there's too much of column B because we've said too much, or there's just too much falling on our shoulder. And usually it's, you know, exhaustion and stress, eventually really poor health, things that get scary like trips to the hospital that we were not expecting, you know, having to go on medication that we wish we didn't have to. Overall, poor quality of existence. So C is basically the risk. So when I go through this with people, A is like the cool things in life, the value, the enrichment, the things we wish we had more of. B are the things that we could be managing poorly, or maybe there's just too much of. Sometimes we're just in a period of life where it's overwhelming for a various number of reasons. I talk about that in chapter 9, actually, of the book, of times in your life where it's a marathon, and you know, it could be because someone's very sick, it could be because of a divorce, it could be because of the birth of a business. There are lots of things that just take a lot of time and stamina, and it's just going to take a while. So column B gets very hairy. And column C are the things that we have to keep in mind if we actually want to make a change. You know, if I really want to change these things in column C, sometimes we have to keep that to the forefront. And part of my story, which most of you know, when I met and married my husband, Tom, I moved from Cambridge, Massachusetts, 4 miles from my place of work, to Ipswich, Massachusetts, about 35 miles from my place of work. And that meant an hour and a half each way, 5 days a week. And then the consequence of that was no more 90-minute yoga classes. I really didn't want to meet anyone after work for a drink because then I wasn't going to be home till like 10 or something like that. It was like all the good stuff kind of went away, and I'd get home at 7. You know, I left the house before 7 with my husband still sleeping, but you know, and you know, and I just felt like all this was on my shoulder. And again, no more time for fun. So when we went away on the weekend or went skiing or whatever, I wasn't even having a good time because all I could think about was all the, you know, the crap left at home that still had to be done. So I knew I had to make some changes. And basically, you know, column A was, you know, I want to be happier. I mean, it was, you know, or I wanted time for yoga. I wanted time for friends and things like that. And column B, I was managing everything poorly. I think my own background, I didn't get a lot of life lessons in column B and really being able to manage things very well. So I had to learn all of this from scratch. Column C was that, you know, I was really unhappy when I got home at the end of the day. I was resentful in ways, you know, I was resentful towards my husband, or I was resentful towards my employer. And basically I wanted to reverse all of that. So some of this may or may not be resonating with you, but as we get going with the various tips in the book, if there's something from column A, like if you were to do this exercise on your own and say, you know, and you could even do it with the categories that I gave before, and I'll outline this a little bit in the text when I finish up the post, but is there something that you want to spend more time on or more intention with? Maybe it's not a ton of time, but more intention with regard to your health, with regard to your profession, or your, you know, whatever is driving your the way that you make a living professionally, your romantic life, or again, your spiritual side, or your personal wisdom, or however you would develop that. If there is one area, what would you want to tweak a little bit? What would you like to be able to do differently? And maybe there's one of these areas that you've tried a few times and it hasn't gone that well. So basically tonight is about choosing something so that when we go through the tips, we have something to kind of, hang our hats on. Otherwise, it might not be as meaningful, if that makes sense. So that's a little bit of the ABC matrix in terms of determining what would be nice to have more of, what do I not do very well that I'd like to get better at, and then what's the negative consequence. Again, looking at that so that we can decide to actually change some things. So again, the tips will help to address column B items so that we do them better, or we begin to say no to some things. And but it's good to have some things in column A. We really have to have clear intentions in order for any of this to go very well. And I will say too that sometimes my intentions, I wish they could be clearer. I mean, I want to set like really clear business goals, and I have a really hard time like putting a very firm number on like what number I would like to achieve, or the better we can all get at that, the easier it will be to achieve the thing if we can just spell it out. So that's what it's all about. So I just did this ABC matrix in order to like develop a goal or something that we're working towards. I'm going to do like little 10-minute live streams over the next couple of days. There's a couple of other ways to go about this in terms of determining what you want to change. One is a drain exercise that I do. Another one is a brain dump exercise that I do. So those will just be short live streams that anyone can tune into anytime. You can watch them in replay. And I want to see if there's anything else I wanted to say tonight in terms of getting our intentions set. So maybe just give some thought to something that you might want to tweak or maybe significantly change. Or again, if you have some major goal already that you're trying to achieve, that's a really good thing to work on in this. Next week, like I said, I'd love to be able to do these always on a Thursday night. I'm going to be on an airplane next Thursday night, so I'm going to be doing it on Wednesday night next week at 7:30. And again, if anyone doesn't have the book, it is on Amazon, or you can connect me. Yeah, you can have me mail it to you directly. And I felt like there was something else I wanted to say. Again, if there are any questions throughout the week, PM me, private message me, or post them to the group. And share the word on this. I'd like to have a lot of people have a better experience of life. I feel like it can be pretty chaotic and sometimes not as satisfying as we'd like it to be. So I think that's it for tonight, and hopefully see you guys again. Thank you for coming, and yeah, have a great one. Have a great week. I will say one more thing. I want to do this on Thursdays because I want to give us plenty of time to like prepare for the rest of the next week. I like having a 3 or 4 day buffer before we're actually trying to see what we might want to implement the next week. And there'll be some weeks when you don't want to implement anything because you're not inspired to, or because you don't have time or anything, and that's totally cool. This is not about doing everything by the book. A lot of us have perfectionistic ideas, and as soon as we start to apply something and we feel like we don't do it 100%, we begin to get very judgmental. That is not at all where we're going with this. This is all about positive, whatever tweaks make sense for you, experimenting with things, and this being as freedom generating as possible. That's what it's all about. Okay, so have a great night, and I'll be in touch soon. Again, thanks for showing up, and I'm going